You know, you don't choose your religion. Well, I mean, you can, sorry, but you just don't choose what culture you're born into. You don't choose that. That's just what happens. But you can keep arguing that for everything, that everything that's ever happened to you was never your choice. It was predetermined. But, oh, well, you just chose to pick up this sticky note and drop it. And it's like, yeah, but I didn't choose to be here in this moment. Everything that's ever happened was predetermined. Like, I don't have a choice. In the Bible, or at least Christians, they often talk about practicing free will. You know, they talk about free will being something that is practiced, but they also talk about exercising your free will. So what I realized was that you have decisions that are made with very little effort. When you talk about will as well, you talk about you will something, you know, you will something into existence, or you have a lot of will power, right? So to cultivate free will or willpower, I think it's just like lifting weights. Just like lifting weights. You start off with making small decisions. Like, I decide to go to the grocery store, or I decide to get out of bed. Like, for
Make
some
my
people,
bed in the morning.
exactly. For some people, that's really hard to do, you know? Whether it's because, you know, they've lost the will to live, you know, they're depressed or something, who knows? But then what they talk about with people who are depressed is that you take small steps, right? You start with making the bed, you start with getting out of bed, and eventually maybe you'll have the strength to make the decision to go to the store. Now, for somebody like me who is healthy, those all seem really simple, right? But then I'm like, wait, how does that make any sense? Like, I can do whatever I want. No. When push comes to shove and I need to make a really hard decision, can I do it? Oftentimes people will choose to put it away and they'll justify their decision like, oh, I didn't make that hard decision because of such and such. I attempted suicide once, and I changed my mind in the middle of doing it. And I don't know how that worked, because I used like a really thin electrical cord. So it's kind of thin, right? It's really hard to really put your hands around and pull yourself up on it. But I hung myself with one, and then I kind of grabbed it, you know, because it was around my neck like that, and then behind. I kind of grabbed it and pulled myself up. And then once I got up, I had to really like put my fingers there to keep the circulation from cutting off. And, you know, my head hurt. I was tired. I fell down. I did it like on a beam from a ceiling. And then when I fell off the beam, I just crawled to bed. And then that night I had a dream where I was sitting in a room made of light, which is really weird to imagine because it's a room, but it was also infinite at the same time. So there was this sense of duality within the room itself. It was really cool feeling. But I was sitting there like cross-legged on the floor, suspended on the floor. I don't know. It was weird. It was a room made of light. And then this door in front of me opened, but it wasn't really a door. But the light that came out was a little bit more, the light I was in was white, kind of like the wall, sort of. And then the light that came from this room was more yellow, like the light behind Jasper. A little bit more like that. And out walked a figure made of light. And when it walked closer to me, it kind of started to take form a little bit more. And then it was me, made of light. In a way, I'm already dead, and I'm also alive. So what happens after I die doesn't matter, because even when I die, I'll still be alive. You know,
Yep.
But everything now is duality. So it's like, you know, it honestly, I think it's interesting, you know, what happens after we die, if anything happens. But at the same time, I also with actually having that experience, it doesn't really have an emotional impact on me anymore.
Welcome everybody to Common Underground Podcast with your host Jasper Rodenhuis, me, Tjeerd, and today a good friend of mine is our guest. His name is Jelle, and Jelle is somebody that I met while I was living in the Caribbean. I moved there at a young age of 18, then lived there for a few years on this very small 5 square mile island. It's about 1,100 to 1,400 people living there year round, maybe. And one of my favorite people on that island is Jelle. And Jelle is a conservationist. He is an expert on the hiking trails on the island that can tell you from sunset to sunrise about all the different wildlife you can find on Saba. And so very inspirational person all around. And without further ado, Jelle, can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born on Curacao, a little island north of Venezuela. My parents are European, with my dad being Dutch, and my mom is French and Polish and Dutch as well. But I grew up in the Caribbean with a lot of European culture, then moved to Saba when I was 11, which is an English-speaking island. So it's less typical ABC island Antillean and more West Indian in a lot of ways. So I moved over there, learned to speak English, somewhat integrated with the culture here while keeping a lot of the Caribbean and European. I have 3 brothers. My parents are divorced. That's always a big part of people's lives, isn't it? I feel like you can tell a lot from that. Also about myself, I've always been interested mainly in nature, not from a necessarily a biological perspective, like scientific, but more from an experiential standpoint. So that's something I'm really into. Also, I think too much about anything you can imagine. A lot of philosophical things, I guess, or existential questions about existence, dreams. That's why I loved you guys' podcast from the dream thing, where actually TJ mentioned me in it. So I was like, yeah, that's my boy. That's what we do. Talk about dreams, man. Spend way too much time. I guess kind of hard to say who I am, because I feel like I'm everyone and everyone is me. Like, people have more in common than they have apart. And so yeah, I like drinking, you know. Not like drinking. I actually stopped drinking for 2 years because I was doing too much of it. It's really easy to drink in the Caribbean, like not just on Saba. Saba's stereotyped for being a drinking island, but it's everywhere in the Caribbean. It's just once you go outside, you know, on the beach, you want the margarita, you want martini, you want whatever, you want the beer at the end of the day because it's hot all the time. You know, in summer, you go outside in the Netherlands, have a beer on the, you know, terrasje. Here it's like that almost every day. So yeah, I go off on tangents a lot too. I also really like knives, I guess. Yeah, I like knives. I like woodworking, even though I don't do it. I started making a spatula yesterday and a spoon out of wood with my girlfriend. Yeah, lately I quit working in conservation, and I started working in pharmaceuticals, in a pharmacy, mainly because one thing that people don't know about conservation is that it's heartbreaking and backbreaking, and it's not good for your mental or emotional health most of the time. And I hear that everywhere around the world, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So that's why I decided to do something easy, like work inside a pharmacy for a while. That's about it.
What does this work imply, like conservation? What is something you need to do in this job?
Everything. You end up having to do. So basically, you're a janitor, a guide, a biologist, a boat driver, you end up doing transport, so transporting tourists to different places. You end up becoming somewhat of a mechanic, because fix engines from the cars and the boats, because most conservation organizations are quite broke. And one way to get around that is just to have a few people do a lot of things. I also did administration. I worked in the shop to sell souvenirs. I ended up doing a little bit of law enforcement. So if people are breaking the law, I have to address that. Of course, I was not an enforcement officer, so I facilitate everything. I'm also not a biologist, so I would facilitate it. I would have all the equipment ready for them, take them over to the site, show them where whatever is that they needed to see, and then monitor to make sure they weren't breaking any rules of the marine park.
While you are the captain on boat, and you also know the first aid for if somebody starts tripping out, and that's why I guess it's such an impressive job, because you do need to know everything.
Yeah, you all the time.
I'm so happy that your mind and your body is getting this holiday in the form of maybe some like a job that is like maybe a little bit more considered like a common job. We all have these types of jobs. Like right now, I do work doing like data entry for COVID contact tracing, and even though these jobs have a bad rep for being mind-numbing perhaps or repetitive, there's something to be said for the stability that they offer when you end up with a lot of free time that you can spend without being exhausted from all your work tasks.
Yeah,
for sure. So in this episode, we're gonna talk something that you put forward as an idea to talk about is free will. So before I'm gonna ask my entry question of what we mean with free will, what made you decide to be interested in this particular topic? Because there are so many philosophical topics that we can talk about. What makes you be sparked by free will per se?
Recently, because when I was in college, I have another great friend, Ivo. He's a lot like, well, anyway, a friend of mine, Ivo, he was studying philosophy, and he told me that that I should develop my own set of morals, of ethics, like my own code, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever. So he gave me a bunch of books of philosophy to let me develop that, and I discovered that there is a very strong argument to be made that free will does not exist, in the sense that we think of it, that we are free to make our own decisions or whatever. And they argue it's not true, that all of your choices are predetermined all the time. And, even as I say it, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, but then
what determines?
What determines? Good question. So in the same way that when I drop the sticky notes, when I let them go, they're going to fall. The paper doesn't have a choice. That's just what it does. It's kind of the same thing where, if I was actually going to explain this because I thought about it a little bit. So they took these twins, just to give you a bit of background, right? They took these twins from birth, separated them, and then when they found each other later in life, they discovered that they actually liked the same things and even dressed the same way. So that is nature, right? That's sort of the characteristics that you're born with. You're born with a predisposition to like certain things. So in a sense, you don't really have a choice, but then also there's nurture, where as you grow up, you are sort of formed to like or do certain things because you were introduced to them, you like them.
As a response to your environment, which would be different than this hypothetical twin somewhere else. So that makes sense. You fit the mold of your society, wherever that may be, or your community, or even your family unit, to adapt. But then you're saying that when you're born, like these two twins that have the same genetic potential at birth, they go through life on a similar trajectory that's predetermined just by nature, you're saying.
So, But to carry it even further, you don't choose how you are born. So that is a limiter in your freedom. You don't choose who your parents are. You don't choose where you are born. So you have all these things. So you don't really choose what is happening from the fundamental level already. You know, you don't choose your religion. Well, I mean, you can, sorry, but you don't choose what culture you're born into. You don't choose that. That's just what happens. But you can keep arguing that for everything, that everything that's ever happened to you was never your choice. It was predetermined. But, oh, well, you just chose to pick up this sticky note and drop it. And it's like, yeah, but I didn't choose to be here in this moment. Everything that's ever happened was predetermined. Like, I don't have a choice.
Okay, yeah.
And
Well, there's some things that I would spark, like with a paper. There are certain set of laws that, and law of gravity that pulls this paper downwards. But I don't know what you're going to say next. So that's because, like, I think that there's a certain interplay between humans having a capability of making a certain choice, and thereby they can choose to escape a certain law, or they can follow it. So there's I'm saying this as assumptively because there's definitely a discussion there, but they can see it into religion as well, where they're saying that there's a predeterministic, that God created everything, and he guides our life. And then in science as well, where they're saying, we're all just programs by ourselves, and it's all made out to be very predeterministic. But I do think that there's something inherent into us as humans, and I'm gonna talk about this. We're going to talk about this further, but let me just ask, like, what do you mean with free will? How would you describe this term?
I guess,
oh,
how would it fit into this nature versus nurture that you're describing?
Well,
sorry, I went far on a tangent. Um, so I discovered that there's a good argument to be made that free will doesn't exist. But then recently, I had a revelation that I because I had kind of an existential breakdown, but recently I had a revelation that, to me at least, it does exist. And that's what I kind of want to talk about, why I think it does exist.
That makes sense. Now, can I ask? So, basically, you're saying that you have made you have made the decision, maybe even with your free will, to separate yourself from the world where everything is predetermined. And it sounds like when you have a revelation that says, I actually do have free will, is a moment of taking responsibility for your actions after not
Exactly.
feeling like you were responsible for them before that moment. Yeah.
Oh, dude, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that's very profound because when we talk to people, a lot of people, they might listen to what you were just saying about everything being predetermined and just not sounding right to them because they feel like, no, but I make all decisions all the time. However, what you're describing actually is true for a lot of people that always point the finger backwards. So when they're asked, why do you do this wrong? They'll be like, well, my parents didn't raise me right, you know? And you go to the parents and you ask the mother, and it's like, so what's up? What went wrong here? And she's like, well, my mother didn't raise me right. And you keep going backwards and backwards. And then at some point you get to Eve and you ask Eve, it's like, what went wrong? And she's like, well, the serpent tempted me to do it. And you look at the serpent and he just sits there in silence because, he's really not responsible. We all are. But then it's a beautiful philosophical question to talk about: to what degree are we responsible? Would you say that we are fully responsible for our actions? Like you said, we are everyone and everyone is us. So every action is our responsibility. Or do you feel like you are still separate in that system and only responsible for your own actions?
Well, I think you can only be responsible for your actions if you have knowledge of the knowledge, whether, and sometimes also the amount of intelligence you have plays into that. And I'm not just talking about that you can intellectually intelligent, like from an intellectual standpoint, know what you are doing, but also have the emotional intelligence to understand what you are doing. I think with that knowledge and that intelligence, yeah, you do carry the responsibility. But if somebody doesn't have it, then it's not necessarily their responsibility. But it is. It's usually just sad when somebody.
Is there a responsibility without knowledge? This may be a good way to phrase this.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I of course, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be consequences. Like I'm not saying that ignorance is a cause for denying somebody the consequences of their actions. You know, I think that when you touch fire, you should get burned. You know, oh, I didn't know it was gonna burn me, so it's fine. You know,
So the consequences are like the natural laws that you visualize when you like show the paper falling. The consequences are going to happen regardless. But are you responsible if you don't know that you're doing all of this?
I guess that's subjective, but maybe not. No, maybe not. They are. That's a good question.
If we are all one, and if we are basically like just unity, then that would mean that we are responsible for everything. We're responsible for blowing the wind and shining the sun. And we're still kind of looking at it segmentedly if we only take responsibility for our own actions, which is already a massive leap, just to take responsibility for your own actions. But to then kind of become part of that unity, take responsibility for everything that's happening, seems like it's the next natural step.
Seems like a lot of work, though.
Yes, I think so as well, because like I don't think everyone has free will per se, because like you said as well, like they will point their fingers and they see like they're a victim of their life, and they say like I am what happened to me instead of what I choose to become. But once you're recognizing what you're saying, that you are part of this unity, you're part of life, and that everything that you do, you are responsible for, then you get into this realm where free will does exist, and that is something we have to cultivate. Now, if we look at the term free will, there's like two words in it. There's free, which we can talk about with freedom, which is something distinct from free will, I would say, and there's will. So we want something. These terms together, free will, we want something, and so we are attached to what we desire. So thereby, are we then truly free, because we're already set a lens towards our aim, like what we want. But there's so many other possibilities that we could be drawn to, because of our set of preferences that we have in our, well, in our ego, in our self identity. We are just pulled by our desires, but there are so many things in our reality that is very interesting. So how do we cultivate this faculty of wanting the right thing? That's a question I would ask.
Good question. So I have a good answer to that, I think. In the Bible, or at least Christians, they often talk about practicing free will. You know, they talk about free will being something that is practiced, but they also talk about exercising your free will. So what I realized was that you have decisions that are made with very little effort. When you talk about will as well, you talk about you will something, you know, you will something into existence, or you have a lot of will power, right? So to cultivate free will or willpower, I think it's just like lifting weights. Just like lifting weights. You start off with making small decisions. Like I decide to go to the grocery store, or I decide to get out of bed. Like for
Make
some
my
people,
bed in the morning.
exactly. For some people, that's really hard to do, you know, whether it's because, you know, they've lost the will to live, you know, they're depressed or something, who knows? But then what they talk about with people who are depressed is that you take small steps, right? You start with making the bed, you start with getting out of bed, and eventually maybe you'll have the strength to make the decision to go to the store. Now, for somebody like me who is healthy, those all seem really simple, right? But then I'm like, wait, how does that make any sense? Like, I can do whatever I want. No. When push comes to shove and I need to make a really hard decision, can I do it? Oftentimes people will choose to put it away and they'll justify their decision like, oh, I didn't make that hard decision because of such and such. Like, let's say I've discovered, well, a really hard one for me was discovering that a buddy of, was it? Yeah, a buddy of mine was cheating on his girlfriend. And the girl he was cheating on his girlfriend with was also a friend of mine. So I could have said, you know what? It's their relationship. It's none of my business. But I also felt the responsibility to tell my, you know, my buddy, or not my buddy, my buddy's girlfriend, that she was being cheated on. You know, that was a really hard decision for me to make. It was hard for me to. It was harder for me to tell them than it was to not tell them. But that was still a decision. And the harder the decision is to make, the more you need to practice for it, I think. So I think that's what free will is about exercising and practicing to make those hard decisions, like standing up for your rights. It's often easier to let, you know, an entity that seems really powerful to do whatever they want, as long as you have food on the table, fuck it, you know, I'll continue with my life, than it is to tackle it head on. Like, that's a difficult decision, and we make all these reasons to not do it, but basically all these reasons are just us saying, oh, I have all of these other smaller decisions to make, I can't make this big one, for example. That's how I feel about it.
We always make the decision to choose comfort instead of action. When we're put in a situation like this, what's the most easiest thing to do, which might not be what you actually want to do.
I think with
preventing.
Well, with the word decision, there's something that is implied there as well, is that there's a certain confusion, because there's two set of directions that you can take, and how do you base your decision which one is the right direction to make? So that is something that people are really dwelling upon, very well, not dwelling upon, but it makes them polarized, because that's something that's happening currently in our society as well. There's on the one side people saying, for example, you cannot take you should not take the vaccine, and other people are saying you should take the vaccine. So there's two extremes there. But then how do you synthesize, how do you see that there, in philosophy you call this a false dilemma, where there's just two options, but there's actually a lot more within the spectrum that we can choose upon. But because people only see these two options that were suggested, it's found it very difficult to, oh, maybe there's a third option here, or maybe there's something else that can be possible. So that's something that is also important to mention, because a decision, like if you go to the grocery store and you want to buy some cat food, there's I don't know how many types of cat food is there, but there's so much. So it just creates a confusion. What is my cat like the most? Like it's a cat, you know, like they know it's just meat and they will eat it anyway. But because we're living in a culture where there's so much choice, we're getting more and more confused, because how do we know? We don't have a set of tools that really help us to make these decisions. There are some tools, I would say, but that's something that we could maybe go into, like how we can make this decision very consciously.
Because we use one tool, and that's our ego. And so you can have a very effective tool, or you can have an ineffective tool. And I guess with exercising your free will, it's kind of like sharpening your blade. You make these decisions, but you never really feel good about the decision, because there's always, in the back of your mind, you're like, well, what if I chose the other thing? And did I really weigh all the options? Did I consider all of the information? And that's tough, because how can you ever consider all the information before making a decision? There's an infinite amount of information.
I think that's, wow. I think that's something to practice as well, is not dwelling too much on that. Like, I'll give you guys a story, a really, really weird story, right? It has to do with dreams. And I told TJ about it already, I think. But I sometimes have these weird dreams where it has a different feeling. But basically, I'm watching myself doing something but I also feel myself doing it. And I can hear myself think, but I'm also watching it. It's like if you get into that really self-awareness state where you can kind of, that's why you do a meditation, you watch your own thoughts
like
and stuff
third person living.
Yeah. So it's a dream like that, except it's hyper realistic. Like, it is real, but I also know it's not happening at the moment. It's a really weird feeling. But anyway, so I had one of these, and I was sitting around a table. We were playing dominoes. So with dominoes, you play in teams. You have one person sitting in front of you, just like on a rectangular or square table. You have one person there, one person there, one person there. So it's always 4 people, Caribbean style. And then we were playing that, and my brother was sitting to my right in the dream. To my left was a lady called Caroline. And in front of me was my friend John in the dream. And my brother called me out, because we were living in the same apartment, but I was treating him really not very respectfully. He was having exams. It was high school. He was in high school. I was already working in conservation on Saba. And he called me out saying, hey, you're being really mean to me, really rude. I'm going through exams and stuff. And in the dream, so this is all in a dream, I told him, yeah, dude, I pay the rent. You're living in my house. Like, if I see your pants just laying on the floor, I'm not going to be happy about it. And I'm going to tell you about it. If you don't do the dishes, what am I supposed to say? Oh, sorry, you didn't do the dishes. Like, I was just being super disrespectful, right? I wasn't being nice about it. And he was basically saying, you're hurting my feelings. Please stop. I'm under a lot of stress. I'm having exams. I'm going to be messy. I'm a teenager. Give me a break. But I just dissed him. I just blew him off and said, you know what? You don't get to complain. You're living under my roof. And he got up from the table and he left. And I had that feeling that I had tarnished the relationship with my brother for possibly forever, right? It's a pivotal moment in your life, end of high school. And I was just being really stressful. Anyway, so 3 weeks later, we're sitting around the table playing dominoes. We were playing dominoes almost every night before that. But Caroline had never been on the table with us before. So I'm sitting there, everybody's in the same spot, and all of a sudden I get that feeling like, hey, remember that dream? It's happening now. And my brother raises the issue. And it goes exactly as I thought. And on the outside, I'm doing the exact same thing I was doing in the dream. But all of a sudden, I have that same third person perspective, because I'm like aware of what I'm going to do while I'm doing it. It's an extremely strange feeling, because I'm acting like I am now, but I'm already seeing what I'm going to do while feeling, like it was just so strange. So I'm doing it, and when he finished and I was about to tell him off, I just froze. I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. But it took effort to just sit there and be like, okay, what else can I do? And I just told him. He looked nervous. Like all of a sudden, instead of going into myself, like, oh, you're living under my roof, like being all egotistical, I just checked my ego, looked at him and saw that he was scared. Then I realized he was doing this in front of all these people because he was scared of me, his brother. He shouldn't be scared of me. I'm his brother. Like, come on. I just went, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. And he just visibly like relaxed, you know, he was just like, you know, he was still mad, but he didn't leave, you know.
He was expecting what you had dreamt of.
Yeah, and going to do it. And I have these dreams every so often that will actually happen. And then I'm like, okay, but this has been the only time where it was actually relevant. Like,
so is this the moment when you realized I actually have free will and I could have just done it like I was predestined to do it, but I chose to make a 180 and change my actions?
Yeah, this is where I realized what free will really is. It's using the knowledge that you have available to go against whatever predetermined action you have. And you exercise that by having that third person perspective and enacting, doing the right thing rather than what instinctually feels right to you. And I use that a lot now. It can be exhausting, honestly, to go against your natural reaction or action or decision or whatever you want to call it. It's really exhausting sometimes, but it's worth it sometimes. Like,
Yeah,
when you take responsibility for your action, I guess you see the ways in which your action can branch into different results, and you take a moment to decide which route you want to take, but that requires a certain level of gnosis or knowledge about how people are around you, what cause and effect, and also, I guess, a high level of social and emotional intelligence.
I guess so.
And before we did this podcast, I was researching a little bit about reincarnation, and there's a Kabbalistic practice that they do at the end of their life. If they feel like they made certain mistakes, they could, by through prayers, assumedly, I don't know if this is real, but they say that they can like correct the mistake. So can they would reincarnate into the same body, and they could have the capability of correcting their mistakes that they did. So that is something that through your story I was sparked by, and that is also another example that there, if this is real, that there could be a way that because we would assume that we cannot, you know, once we live our lives, that's it. If we have certain regrets, then we cannot go back. That's what people say. But if this is real, that we can reincarnate not just into another's body, but that we can relive our lives and that we can correct this, that would be really interesting, because that would change a lot of our set assumption of what these laws that we are need to follow, and what the limitations of those are. But then at the other side, one of my own experiences also with a dream is that I had a dream of what would happen the next day, and the next day we just like normally talked about what we dreamed last night, and then he asked me like, what was your dream? And I said, well, actually this is what I dreamed, that we went to the supermarket, just us two, when normally we would be with a group But on this rare occasion, even though we didn't have a break at first, but then like suddenly there was a moment that we did have a break and did have an opportunity to go to the supermarket. And once we finally walked there and we talked about our dreams and he asked me, then the realization came through to me, oh, this is what I dreamed actually. But I did say it to somebody else in the morning as well, but I forgot about it in the meantime. So for me, that really made me think like, we have a certain way that we think, okay, this is how time progresses. But through this dream, it actually showed me what will happen in the future. In the future, I really realized that it aligned with this dream. So there's so many things that open up from this experience, like and something, a lot of things that we have to rethink about what life really implies. It's really interesting.
That's skills listening to that. That's cool, man.
Yeah, really rare experience that I have. And I have a similar experience like that, but it was a very incredible insight that you get from that, because they call it actually retro no, it's not retrospection. It's I forget the name of it, but there's a certain technical term for it that you perceive that I think it's precognition actually. That is that you are recognizing something before it happens, and it's also something I wanted to say. If you want to make a decision, there's two ways really to know which way to do the right thing. Like one is the intuition, something that we cannot really articulate that well because it's just so straightforward. But then if we are discarding logical thinking, then we also have an imbalance and we just follow
Mm.
what our feelings say. What do you guys think on that?
I think
Wow.
that's correct.
Can you elaborate on it? Why do you think it's correct?
Oh, so when you're guided by your feelings, for example, and you let you kind of I guess let things go as they want, then you're not really fully in control. Going back to the free will aspect of this, I was just thinking, how can we actually exercise our free will if the things that we will, the things that we want, aren't really decided by us, but they are decided by all of these external factors. So if, for example, you want a BMW and a house on the beach and a helicopter to bring you to work, that's not something that you want. That's something somebody else has placed inside of your mind. And so you can say, I want that, but you never really learned about those things.
Mm.
And we're taught that that's something that you should want. Then maybe instead you wanted to become somebody who writes poetry whilst they take care of horses and found their real happiness in there.
Mm.
So I think that the dreams, they also allow us to kind of break through that thin layer of ego that somehow seems to inform most of our decisions, because what we really want sometimes only accessible to us in these states where our identity or whatever personality is associated to our names kind of fades into the background a little bit. And so for me, what I've been noticing about my dreams, when I feel really happy, is when I'm in nature, when I am around people that also like nature. And I have this thing with music. Like I might have been born with seven fingers, but that's not the only reason. I feel like I could never create music. That's something that this reincarnation or the incarnation of me has no ability to make music whatsoever. I can't even hold a beat, but I feel so good listening to music. And so I've noticed that sometimes my dreams are actually audio instead of visual. And I was wondering, have either of you ever had that, where your dream is actually music, but not an experience that can be visualized?
Never.
No, no, me neither. No, that would be an
No.
That's
interesting thing though to experience because we
Yes,
all.
so this is an experience I've had when I was, this was in a phase of my life. I was doing a lot of weird things. I was really trying to communicate with whatever is beyond, and I feel like I was even like painting sigils on my windows at this time. I was living on Saba, and I was trying to always go to sleep with the intention of going somewhere else. That was a really big part of what I was learning about. I was having these experiences of sleep paralysis, which were kind of like a, like an introduction into the world of wait a second, there is something to be said about dreams, maybe being more than just your brain screensaver. I think there's actually some other place that you visit. Maybe it's still the same place, but just with a dimension layered on top of it that we can't see when we're awake. Maybe something like that. But I had this experience as I was going to sleep, and I was going through that phase where your body is kind of going to sleep, but your mind is still awake. And a part of this for me has always been these audio hallucinations. They can be really scary sometimes. It's maybe chains dragging across the floor. Maybe it's like some children that are demonically laughing. It's really creepy stuff. Yeah, it can happen. And of course, somebody can even, like, if you're so inclined, there can be even like scary entities that go stand over you. But I just remember the sound of chains, like how like two chains that go in like past each other, one up and one down, like a loud sound. And then all of a sudden, it faded into colors, and it was like I was inside of an ambilight, and I was listening to Pink Floyd, and it was something that was really. This was, I think, it was like Any Color You Like, or one of these songs that is really chill. And it's from Dark Side of the Moon, but it's one of those moments where everything is kind of really floaty and relaxed. And so it put me at this great state of mind where I became so peaceful that I realized that I don't know what's going on. I'm listening to Pink Floyd, but I just went to bed. Like, did I leave music on? And then I noticed that as I was listening and thinking at the same time, suddenly my thoughts were interfering with the music. And
whoa.
I thought, wait a second, I have control over this music. What's going on? And so I tried to see what I can do. And then with my mind, I started basically remixing Pink Floyd, which is already I mean, I feel privileged that I got the honor to do that. But I started having this audio dream that was based around colors and me having control over music, which I guess was something that it's not really accessible to me in daily life. For me, like, it's magic to see somebody write music. I don't know. How about you guys?
No, I've only had it when I'm awake. The colors and the music and being able to remix the music. Like, I'll put on a song in my head and I'll just start messing with it, but only while I'm awake and only when I'm like kind of relaxed, sort of half asleep. But when I'm doing it, I'm not really aware that I'm doing it. And when I catch on to it, like, wait, what am I doing? Then it kind of fades away. So I guess it's sort of a dream state, but not like you're describing it exactly.
I feel like free will is involved in this process, though, because it's like you're doing something, and I'm wondering where are the decisions coming from. If free will is real, where is the decision coming from? Because your decision, sometimes you don't make the decision consciously. You just decide to do something, and it's basically like breathing. You can do it consciously, but if you forget about it, it keeps going all the same.
Yes, I don't know if you guys are familiar with philosopher Heraclitus, but he has a famous statement that he says like you cannot step into the same river twice. So I think like good way to put it is that we can choose to step into the river, but if we would do it again, it will not be the same river because the river is always changing, and it's not the same river that we're stepping into. And if we, I think also dreams are very interesting because I don't know what you guys think of this, but I think like the dreams are certain preparation for death, because we are getting used to not being inside of our body and being into realms that are in certain ways beyond our comprehension, because they're so, well, sometimes very chaotic, very symbolic, and very free flowing. But they also say like sleeping is the cousin of death. It's like it's something for me a very big interest, is because there are people overall have a very big fear of death, because they have such a strong association or an identification with their body, with their identification, with their personality, because they haven't heavily invested into it, and that only strengthens it. But then in our dreams, we're showing such things that are very different from our own personal life. It differs from dream to dream, of course, as well. But what do you guys think on that? Is dreams a sort of preparation of that?
I think
I don't.
that we have what do you call it? Our our natural state might not be a consciousness inside of a body. I feel like maybe when we go to sleep at night, that's a well-needed rest from wearing this big chemical factory and carrying it all around. Maybe our natural state is a consciousness or an awareness that doesn't have a body.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. But now that I think about it, I never thought of it that way. But when you mentioned, cousin being the sleep of death, and maybe it's a preparation for death. But I also think that, I don't know. There's it's hard to verbalize, but in a way, I'm pretty sure I'm alive, but I'm also dead at the same time, kind of. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know about the dream thing. It's interesting though. I don't know, because I attempted suicide once, and I changed my mind in the middle of doing it, and I don't know how that worked, because I used like a really thin electrical cord. So it's kind of thin, right? It's really hard to really put your hands around and pull yourself up on it. But I hung myself with one, and then I kind of grabbed it, because it was around my neck like that, and then behind. I kind of grabbed it and pulled myself up. And then once I got up, I had to really like put my fingers there to keep the circulation from cutting off. And, my head hurt. I was tired. I fell down. I did it like on a beam from a ceiling. And then when I fell off the beam, I just crawled to bed. And then that night I had a dream where I was sitting in a room made of light, which is really weird to imagine, because it's a room, but it was also infinite at the same time. So there was this sense of duality within the room itself. It was really cool feeling. But I was sitting there like cross-legged on the floor, suspended on the floor. I don't know. It was weird. It was a room made of light. And then this door in front of me opened, but it wasn't really a door. But the light that came out was a little bit more. The light I was in was white, kind of like the walls, sort of. And then the light that came from this room was more yellow, like the light behind Jasper. A little bit more like that. And out walked a figure made of light. And when it walked closer to me, it kind of started to take form a little bit more. And then it was me, made of light. And he sat down, or I sat down in front of me, and we just talked. And I don't know what we talked about, but I woke up and I was like, okay, guess I won't be doing that again. But I felt like invigorated with a will to live. Like I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna live now. Like I chose to die because I was not because I just wanted to die. That was it. And I was just like, okay, let's do it. I didn't write a note or anything. I was just like, all right, fuck it, let's do it. Doesn't matter. But I changed my mind in the middle of it, which was already weird. Like I can't figure it out. Like I want to try one of these days, not hang myself and then pull myself up, but just, you know, suspend one from the ceiling and try and pull myself up from
Please
behind.
don't. I think that this is very, very interesting. It points at, like, it's a very profound experience, and I would say that, like, I'm honored that you're sharing the experience with us. I am not as familiar with Jung as I would like to be, but I heard this. I heard this thing said once about a theory from Jung's about where our decisions come from, and how that is affect our free will is our decisions. But
Yeah.
if we're not really making our decisions consciously, sometimes, like you said, you don't know where your decisions come from. And this theory put forth by Jung was that our decisions are actually these kinds of thoughts. They're actually coming to us from our future self, who's trying to manifest itself in the now.
So it's
Yeah,
like
right.
pulling us towards it then, something like that, because it's our future self. Well, the reason why I was saying that is so Rupert Sheldrake actually like was asked by Tim Freak. I showed and I checked this video out where he was asked like what do you think happens after that, and he said that we would dream, because we would dream just like we do every night, but then without the capability to wake up again. And that's really coincide because I'm kind of currently really thinking a lot about like what the nature of death really is and what happens after that, because I found many answers throughout my life, but then I question it again. And he really like made it more integrative, because what he said is also that just like in dreams we have a certain, like we cannot really well, we can control our dreams if we practice it, but something that is really important into dreams is what our beliefs are. If we have a certain apparatus, we have a certain way of like we will not probably be shown something that's without our that we weren't exposed to, like where there's still if we see a dream that might be our friends, or they do might be something.
So if you're raised Catholic, you might have a higher tendency to dream about demons than, say, if you were raised in Papua New Guinea.
Yes, and also with if you are an atheist, then you believe that nothing happens after that, and it could be possibly be the case that once you die, you do see a certain blackness, because that is something that that there's one of my biggest like spiritual teachers, Michael Grob. He had a near death experience, but not like others where they say they see the tunnel and they see a light and then they come back. He said that he didn't see anything, it's just darkness. And I like, for me, he is a very big example because he shows what spirituality is about instead of talks about it. So I know that he's not lying about it, but for me it was very difficult because I always thought, that they all say the same thing about that, but then he is here and he says that it might be just like what the atheist said, that there's nothing after that. So how can I integrate these views together? And something I've thought about then later is like maybe beliefs are, even though this net near death experience that he had, he was 7 years old. So I'm not sure about his beliefs at that point.
Recollection.
But I do think like
I wonder, like, how can you have that? This is a thing that I've wondered as well, because I think a lot of people are afraid of death because they view it as being locked in a dark room forever. And it's kind of hard for me to imagine how you can have an experience of nothing. Like, we know that our experience and our awareness, it doesn't end with the body. And there are people that are brain dead for extended amounts of times, and they still come back. And they they describe that their awareness doesn't stop at any moment. No, it continued onwards beyond like having a body. And I guess that these near-death experiences or actual death experiences where people do come back, they point to the possibility that our awareness is inhabiting our body, but it isn't our body, and that there's something beyond. And the way that I've kind of come to view this, and of course, it's not dogmatic, but I've come to view this as our world being a dimension of physicality, but there being multiple dimensions, and that there's dimensions below ours and there's dimensions above them. Maybe they're infinite, maybe they're not, maybe, and maybe it's fractal in nature. But I'm thinking that when we dream, that we might slip into this dimension that's right above ours, that isn't as physical, where you don't require a physical body. You still have a body, but it's made out of light. And is a light overlay on top of the world might be what people call the astral realm, which is often described as just our Earth, but then much more pretty. Everything is made up out of light, and there's just this sense of instant manifestation. If you think of something, you can manifest it in your hand. This type of dimension could exist right above ours and might be the waiting room that we enter when we die. We might spend a lot of time there. It might be the next level. I don't want to say that I know, but I do feel like there is a correspondence between the way people describe this astral realm that you visit in an outer body experience and the place that people seem to describe after having a near-death experience. Because even though there is some diversity in how people describe these, it's an overwhelmingly similar account that people bring back from death, of a world made up out of light, where they can commune with others that are not them, that are sometimes taking the forms of ancestors or spirits. Sometimes it's a guide. I think it's dangerous to be too curious about this, because it ends up making you into this chaser of experience, and then you might end up, I'm gonna experiment with DMT and I'm just gonna have this death experience and then just come back. I believe that there is a very high likelihood that when we toy around with this and we're literally playing with death, it's that sometimes what you learn on the other side, it might kind of corrupt your hard drive, your mind, when you come back here. And so some people never really do truly come back.
I've been, when I got this job, or just before I got this job, I decided to kind of get back into exploring that realm, like TJ and I were doing before. And I guess doing this podcast was kind of a segue into that, in a sense. So this has honestly been a really informative, enlightening podcast or talk, because both of you kind of are adding to some ideas, bringing some old ones up, kind of putting them into new perspectives, and it's really fun. But what I was saying before was that about the what happens after you die question and stuff like that, dreams, is that I do believe that when I, decided to off myself, that in a way, I'm already dead and I'm also alive. So what happens after I die doesn't matter, because even when I die, I'll still be alive. But everything now is duality. So it's like, it honestly, I think it's interesting, what happens after we die, if anything happens. But at the same time, I also, with actually having that experience, it doesn't really have an emotional impact on me anymore. You know what I mean?
It allows you to live fully.
Not happy. It's just like, it's a thing.
Yeah, no, but I also brought it up because it just shows like our beliefs. I think that our beliefs not just affect our reality in like our moment to moment basis in our own lives, but it could also influence what happens after death. So that shows like what our set of limit of how what our reach is from of our free will. is that if we believe in something so truly, that it might be the case that we actually experience this after that, which a lot of people think this is predetermined. Like some people say we go to heaven, other people say reincarnation, other people say there's nothing happening after that. Maybe they all experience what they believe so strongly, because most people do not realize that what reality implies is actually not separate from themselves. In philosophy, we call this the Cartesian framework, where there's a split between mind and matter. And people say, like, matter just has an influence on us. We just have to abide to matter. There's natural laws. But then, like, all the spiritual people saying just that everything is just mind. But I think it's just more of an interplay between both of them. Is there about if I could ask you certain books that you would recommend for watchers about what you are saying in the beginning about these philosophy books to create a certain moral code, but also on free will? What books would you recommend? Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know. I think you can watch this podcast and just take that concept, and if you really want to know, because this is my recommendation, from what I did, like, take that free will concept and figure it out what it means for you. Just carry that with you. Focus on it, meditate on it, worry about it, cry about it, don't hit your head too hard into the wall. But just carry that with you and just have life throw whatever it has at you that will make sense for you. So, like, when my friend came over, he brought me a box of books, and I won't say those books will work for you, but maybe you'll walk in a library and you'll just see a book that will stand out to you. It could be a comic about Superman, that's one that works as well. It could be anything. Just let life throw it at you if you want it, but be open for it. We'll find a book for you, I think.
So instead of a book recommendation, I guess you mentioned at the start of the podcast that you were kind of challenged to create your own code, your own set of rules to live by. And I know that you have to get out of here, but I wanted to ask if you could maybe share with us an example of your code. What is one of your rules for good living?
Listen to your body. Listen to your body. Learn to listen to your body. Start off making healthy decisions if you can, and then your body will tell you what you need. If you need vitamin C or salt or love, or if you're healthy physically, it will affect you mentally, spiritually, on all layers. Work on your own body, listen to it, and then listen to your dreams. Just listen, because anybody, anywhere, any book, any person standing on the stage can tell you whatever they want. But at the end of the day, life has shown you already. It's going to come from within as long as you take care of yourself. You will feel it. Just listen to you, to yourself. And you're not just you, talking every day, that voice in your head, whatever's coming out of your mouth is not necessarily you. There's so many layers of you. You have gut feelings. Your gut is second brain. Your gut can talk to you. Your dreams can talk to you. Your higher self, the one that I think visited me in my dream, that one can talk to you. Maybe doesn't have to happen. A demon can come out during sleep paralysis and teach you something. It's going to come from you. Just take care of yourself physically. That's easiest. Eat the salad. If your mucus glands are acting up, don't lay off the dairy for a while. Don't drink milk. Don't eat cheese. That's what I try to do when I feel stuffed up. But treat yourself. Don't go overboard. It's all about balance. Everything is balance. So that's
saying your body knows what's best for your health and well-being, and you have to listen to it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that advice.
Cool. I gotta go.
Yes.
All right.
Well, thank you for your time and for the great conversation. And for the viewers watching, thank you for all guys for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, keep following the channel. And yeah, I think that's all about it. So eternal love and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, one last thing. One last thing. I know this is weird, but there's a lot of vitamin D deficiency, especially during lockdowns. So get your vitamin D. It'll help you feel.
Yes, yes.
Thanks.
Very important.
Very
All
good
right.
advice.
All right. That was it. Peace.
See you later.